To invite Doreen, who we're all very, very fond of. She does a wonderful job. Doreen actually is one of us. She was born in Coventry, and her father was a doctor, and he was very involved after Coventry was bombed in 1940. And after the war, Doreen's father decided to emigrate to Canada, and that's how she ended up in Toronto in 1956. And she has a certificate in museum studies. She's also been a practicing artist with exhibitions of her work in Toronto. And she has kept medicine in her family because she married a Department of Medicine emeritus, a doctor who's now a professor emeritus in the Department of Medicine at the University of Toronto. So she became a curator. She's curated some very interesting exhibitions that have focused on subjects such as the garment industry of Toronto, Jewish restaurants, and the involvement of Jewish artists and publishers of the comic book industry. I feel another talk coming up, Doreen. And obviously her greatest work for us has been curating the Cecil Roth Museum in the Shul in Toronto. And I'm sure Doreen will explain how it got there. But just before we start, David and I thought we'd give you some of our little memories of Cecil Roth. I'll leave him to do the major part, but Cecil and Irene used to come to London. They went from London to Israel and then from Israel to New York, and he died in New York. And they always stayed at the Royal Garden Hotel, and we always went off to the Royal Garden Hotel. It was a highlight of the summer, where we dressed up in our best clothes and we had to be on our best behavior to go and visit Uncle Cecil and Auntie Irene. And we always had to take a gift with us. And the one I remember the most was because they traveled a lot, we bought a clothes brush, but it was a traveling clothes brush, so that you took the top off it, you put it inside the clothes brush, and all the bristles stood up. So it was very flat for traveling. And he said, what a lovely present. And he immediately brushed his hair with it. And David and I were in hysterics, and my parents were not amused. And probably just the other thing I'm going to add is that Doreen will be horrified. I mean, their apartment in New York was absolutely full of many of the artifacts you're going to see, which for us as you know, as children and young things, were just playthings. So while the adults would be chatting, we'd be playing with all his artifacts. And the most famous one was, I hope you're going to see, the Elijah chair for the Brit, which was in their hallway. And you came into their flat and everybody slung their coats, jackets, boots into this chair. You'll be horrified.
This is his parents now, Eddie and Joseph Roth. Thank you, Bernie. And here are his, the age of 4, with his grandmother, Mariana Jacobs, right here. And there he is again. Cecil Roth married Irene Davis in the historic Western Synagogue in London in 1928. In her book about their life together, Cecil Roth, Historian Without Tears, Irene writes, during the proceedings, my bridegroom hardly had eyes for me. His gaze was fixed on the embroidered chuppah stretched above our heads. He could not wait for it to be dismantled so he could examine it more closely. It was the last marriage ceremony held under the grand 18th century chuppah, originally made for the Hambro Synagogue that was no longer in existence. The chuppah ultimately joined the collection of the London Jewish Museum, which Cecil was to establish with his friend Wilfred Samuel in 1932. And here we are in his office, which was, as you can see, it has all of the, right here, many of his menorahs and various other things around that now are in the museum in our collection. This is his home office in Oxford. And there are, of course, all of these books, which are now part of the Leeds University Cecil Roth collection in the Brotherton Library, and where I happen to be privileged to visit in June of 2019. Dr. Roth's career was as a reader or professor in both post-biblical Jewish studies at Oxford from 1939 to 1964. Before his appointment to Oxford, he was a worldwide lecturer and author on Jewish and Italian history and culture. In addition to his academic interests, Cecil Roth was also a keen student of British political life, and I'm sure you all know about that. And here we are. So his remarkable facility as a writer is shown by his immense literary output, numbering at least 700 items, including translations into many languages. His lasting influence was as a writer, lecturer, and collector, though he was an inspiring teacher. Roth wrote the standard modern histories of the Jews of England in 1964 and Italy in 1946, a history of the Marranos in 1959, a history of the Jews in the Renaissance in 1964, the House of Nasi in 2 volumes, 1947 to 1948, and popular works such as the Short History of the Jewish People, 1936, and the Jewish Contribution to Civilization in 1938. He edited the Standard Jewish Encyclopedia and was, from 1966 until his death, editor-in-chief of the Encyclopedia Judaica, which was said to be the most comprehensive work of Jewish scholarship ever produced. These are just some images of artworks of Cecil Roth. Here is by the famous Manny Katz, and a pen and ink drawing of Cecil Roth at his desk. I think Claude Marx was a friend of his, and this is sort of an unknown cartoon. The Roth collection came to Beth Tzedec a year later. Dr. Fred Weinberg, as Dina spoke about, her father, was a major art consultant for the museum for many years, and he and his wife, Joy Cherry, were involved in the arrival of the collection and numerous exhibits and activities of the museum. Here we have a slide of Cecil and Irene with the retired curator of the Jewish Museum in New York, who was Dr. Stephen Kaiser. And he was very, very active in getting the collection to Beth Tzedec. He played an important role in that purchase. And here we have a picture of the two Shopsowitz brothers who were involved in, who were paid for the collection to come. That was their gift. And they owned Shopsies, which is a very famous Toronto deli. And as you can see, they definitely enjoyed the food that they ate there in their deli. And here is a picture of the opening night. And here's Dr. Fred Weinberg and his wife, Joy, who hasn't changed at all. She looks just like that today. And you can see Cecil and Irene with one of her fabulous hats on the top there. And here's just an article that was written about the opening in our bulletin, the Beth Tzedec Bulletin, and followed here by the Shopsowitz brothers, an article by Lotta Dempsey, who was a writer in the women's section. And this is all about how the arrival of the collection and the Shopsowitz involvement in it. So this is about amulets now. Amulets, and we're talking, of course, about the collection. This is the most fabulous amulet. It's huge. It's about, I'd say, well, it's about maybe 15 inches tall and about 12 inches wide. And it's from North Africa. But just to tell you a little bit about amulets, they were worn in the most primitive and sophisticated societies and were used to safeguard Jewish women during pregnancy and to assist in safe delivery during the childbirth. The Hebrew word for amulet is kamer, derived from the Aramaic root meaning to tie or fasten. Kamehs were worn around the neck, on the wrist, as a ring, earring, brooch, or were usually engraved or inscribed with geometric figures, emblems, and symbols. And in this case, the Star of David. The menorah, the khamsa, or fish were also images used. Amulets can be found written by hand on parchment also, and in small sizes that will fit into little holders. This Star of David is a rare 19th century North African amulet designed to hang on a wall and made of tin with paper and paint. It's inscribed in Ladino, which is Spanish Hebrew, and symbols to avert the evil eye. There's a long list of different names of the evil spirit Lilith or Lilith. And then the next one is this. This is a beautiful Italian amulet, mostly likely from Rome or possibly Livorno. And it's dated from 1660. The Hebrew inscription reads, Shaddai, a representation of God's name. Livorno Jews enjoyed considerable freedom and had a monopoly over the coral trade. So here we see the use of coral, and you often see coral used in other Judaic. This is perhaps why so much Italian Judaic is embellished with coral. And here we have this whole collection of amulets, an assembly, I call it, of silver or Oriental amulets inscribed with Kabbalistic words and signs from North Africa and the Middle East from the 19th and 20th centuries, a mixture. Most are silver with some decorated with ivory or cornelian. One tiny gold star right here can also be here, sorry, right there. One that belonged to Mrs. Roth and is from England. The next one is a very important piece. This amulet is from Rome. It's about 1800. It's silver, decorated and inscribed. It's a container with in a cartouche form, pierced, embossed, and chased with scrolling foliage. The Hebrew word Shaddai is found on one side in a heart shape, not on this side, and on the other in a decorative frame. And here's the one with the decorative frame. Other decorative motifs include a menorah, and there are grapes. There are other motifs around the edge. Here are the grapes, the Ten Commandments, a flame, and a hanging lamp. But this particular design is a very important design for amulets, in Italian amulets. Sorry. Okay. So I'm now going to talk to you about the Ketubah collection. First of all, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Ketubah collection because recently I've been working on it because we have had every Ketubah, and there's almost 100 of them, photographed by the Israel National Library. And that's because they are adding our Ketubah collection, which is very, very important collection, to their digital collection that will be online sort of permanently from Ketubah collections from all around the world. And we were encouraged to add ours in, and I'm delighted that they helped us get it done. And we've just been finishing up the last few things recently. Our Ketubah collection is one of the finest worldwide and is undoubtedly the one that's housed at Beth Tzedec. The collection consists of almost 100, and they are from Italy, from Persia, from Gibraltar, England, France, Israel, India, Syria, Afghanistan, and many other places. Here we have this one to show you first. This is from Eretz Israel, 1842. It's inscribed and then illuminated on paper. I don't have, unfortunately, time to do a whole lot of detail with you today, but it has a mixture of influences. The knob at the top is an Ottoman style, and the colors and patterns are reminiscent of those of Moroccan Jewish artists. The next one is this one here. This is, sorry, wrong one. No, sorry. Okay, this one, I'll do this one next. This one is from Ancona, Italy. It's dated as 1784. The top portion contains a magnificent cartouche. I know it's a little hard to see today, sorry, depicting a colorful scene of the sacrifice of Isaac. And at the bottom, in the center, is a second beautiful scene showing an enthroned king approached by a group of kneeling men and a younger tenth one gesturing to the king. This is possibly the scene of Joseph and his brothers in Egypt. The bridegroom was Mazel Tov, son of Moshe Yehuda Senegalia, and the bride was Diamanti, daughter of Shabbatai Chaim. And then we have this one, which is a really important one. This one is Okay, this one's from Gibraltar. Now, the ones from Gibraltar that we have in our collection are all in the same pattern. They all have this kind of egg shape, and then they have this floral arrangement around the edge. And then, of course, the crown, which could be crown of Torah, and in this case, probably the British crown. So there it is. And the bottom part is always done a little differently, sometimes initials, sometimes ribbons. But this is a very beautiful example. It's on parchment, and it's illuminated in the traditional shape. We did Ancona, and now this is our piece de resistance of our collection. This is not the best picture of it, but it is a magnificent Venetian ketubah dated from Italy in 1645. It's inscribed and illuminated on parchment, and one of the most important Venetian ketubot extant. It's the bridegroom was Yaakov, son of Asher Sividali, and the bride, daughter of Moshe Sividali. So very often cousins got married in this case. And the other thing about our ketubah collection is that we were able, through Shalom Zabar, who's really the world's expert on ketubot, to discover connections of families through the ketubot, which is a very interesting use of them in a genealogical way. The importance of this as well, apart from the detail from 1645, the detail is still very intact. A lot of gold paint still there, and a huge list of items that would be handed over to the bride's side of the family. And at the very bottom, 2 signatures for each one on all of ketubot. There are always 2 signatures, but these were witnessed by the most important rabbis of the period in Venice, writer and scholar Leon de Modena and Simcha Luzzatto. And many illustrious descendants of the Luzzatto family are known for their contribution to Hebrew religious and secular literature. There's a lengthy list here of 7 conditions, which are shown on the left. And the magnificent double arch imitates Italian holy arcs of the Baroque era, especially in its use of gilt flora and fauna on the columns. Right here, you can't really see it, unfortunately. And this kind of represents the Garden of Eden at the very top here. Okay, now we're going on to something else. This is a lovely tefillin bag. We have in our collection probably about 50 tefillin bags. And I particularly love collecting them because they're so often hand embroidered, and probably by family members. So they weren't sort of made in a shop somewhere. They were given to gifts for a bar mitzvah boy or for a bridegroom. And I think that makes them very special. But this one, on a visit to Florence, Cecil and Irene Roth went to visit Signorina Anna Olivetti. She was the niece of Abramo Giuseppe Pardo Rocche, who was president of the Jewish community of Pisa from 1907 to 1910. And then again, much later, he was tragically murdered by the Germans. Knowing how much Judaica was important to Dr. Roth, she presented him with this crimson velvet 17th century tefillin bag bearing the Baruch Carvalho, a well-known rabbi from Tunisia, the family crest. I just love this piece, along with all the other ones that we have. Very, very special. And I have a talk just about the tefillin bags as well. Now, we have a wonderful collection of Megillot in this collection at Beth Tzedec. And hopefully they will also go on to the Israel National Library at some point. But this is very unusual. I know it's hard to see it, but it is cut out, completely cut out. All of this is cut out, and it's very old. This particular one it's a parchment, and it's also written on vellum, which is parchment, and it's cut out. It's a very rare folk art piece, one of 4. It was discovered by Professor Yael Hoz of Israel that all 4 were cut one on top of the other. And she was able to tell that by photographing them very, very carefully in tiny little areas. And she realized that they were all done at the same time. There's another one in Amsterdam in the Jewish Museum there. And the third one is in the Jewish Museum of London. The fourth in private hands. So I'm hoping that we can get it repaired one day because it's a magnificent piece. And this is a very, very unusual piece. Nobody has one like this. It's a unique scroll, one of the renowned pieces of the collection, and it's often referred to as the Kaifang Megillah. In actual fact, it really couldn't have been the Kaifang Megillah because it's not as old as that community when it started. And that would have been about 500 years ago. And the scroll on the calligraphy is more likely of European style, possibly even Italian, and it's much more likely to be the 18th or 19th century. The illumination is definitely Chinese, as you can see, the little figures here. And the scroll consists of fragments put together and decorated with motifs taken from important Chinese symbols of good fortune. So it's always a highlight of our exhibits when we show our Megillot. And Megillot were one of the very favorite things that Cecil liked to collect, if he could, apart from the magnificent collection of Ketubot. And then we're moving on to Chanukah. This one, I've only got just a few to show you, but we have about 75 in the collection. This one is an unusual one. It's Italian, 17th century. We have a number of them from that period, but this one is particularly interesting. And it was actually Dr. Fred Weinberg who taught me about this, that it's bronze, cast, chased, and gilded. And it shows right in here, which is really hard to see, but right in there, it's like a cardinal's hat. And here are the little putti, or the little angels on the side. And there are masks, and the center cartouche has a coat of arms, which is hard to read now. But this really reflects the Catholic Church and its relationship with the Jews at the time, the Jewish community in Italy.
Dorian, if you put your mouse on the bottom right, you can enlarge the image so we can see it a bit better. The very bottom right, there's a slider bar.
Okay, bottom right.
In the grey, bottom right, there, that slide. If you move it slightly to the right, not too much. That's too much.
Too much? How's that? There you can see it?
Yeah.
I could have done it with some of the other pieces, but that's okay. That's all right. Okay, so now we're going to the next one. I'm going to go back a little bit because we don't want to overdo for the next one. Okay. And this one is kind of an interesting one. It's actually American. It's World War II. And it was made, as you can see, with copper bullet casings, actually brass copper bullet casings. The menorah was made by an anonymous American Jewish airman while stationed in Europe during the Second World War. The lamp was presented to the Roman Catholic base chaplain, who subsequently gave it to Cecil Roth. So we actually have another one that looks like it's kind of on a rifle as well. So people, I suppose during the war, they still wanted to celebrate Chanukah, and that's how they did it. They put whatever they had together. And somebody asked me before about this, and here it is, our chair. And I'll just go down a little bit. Oops, there we go. The Elisha circumcision double-seated chair is one of the most important artifacts in the collection. And somebody said they used to throw their coat over it in the hallway. Tut, tut, tut. It really is a spectacular piece, very, very important piece. And it's a distinct example of North German furniture in the style that's become to be known as the Frederican Rococo. It was made in Berlin in 1766, because it's dated here, during the reign of Frederick II, King of Prussia. It's carved and gilded, and the back cushions are silk velvet with gold thread. And I don't know if I can show you this or not, but I'm going to try. But over on the far side, right in here, if you can read it, it says Berlin. I don't know if you can read the Hebrew, but it says Berlin there. Just thought you might be able to catch it. And it has the Prussian eagle in the center and a Hebrew inscription with the names of the donors and the word Berlin, which I showed you. And it's believed that the prophet Elijah, of course, is at every Brit Milah, so he would probably sit here. The Brit Milah, which is the covenant of a circumcision, the ceremony Pidyon Haben, takes place later. Here we see an unusual object right here, a pewter bowl for the redemption of the firstborn, where the baby boy would be placed. From Amsterdam, circa 1700, the edge of the rim of this is inscribed with the blessing on the redemption of the firstborn. And probably it was used for something else, and then they changed it over to use it for the Pidyon Haben. Here we go. This is about wimples. Another thing that I love, because again, it's beautifully handmade, and really, probably some of them would have been more professionally made, but most of them would have been done by local people, a bit of hand embroidered or painted. Another custom that was developed in Germany during the 16th century was the making of Torah binders or wimples. Oh, that's an old, okay, Jeremy, I just got your email. The cloth was cut into 4 sections, which were stitched together to form a long band. The wimpole was then embroidered or painted with the child's name, his parents' names, date of birth, and the traditional blessing recited during the circumcision ceremony. In addition, it often characterized the child's zodiacal sign, an open Torah scroll, a wedding chuppah, and with elaborately decorated wimpoles, a scene with figures and references to a life of good deeds. The usual practice was for the family of the child to present the wimpole on his first visit to the synagogue, and then it would be used to wrap the Torah scroll. The wimpole became a form of birth record because they were stored in the synagogue, and many of these collections were lost when synagogues were devastated during World War II. So this one is the 1694, very old. And here we get to the Kiddush cups. This is a gilded silver repoussé Kiddush cup with a lid, which stands just over 16 inches, so it's quite tall. The repoussé relief pattern is created by hammering the reverse face working from the back. Cups in this style were fashioned in the mid-17th century by silversmiths in Augsburg, Germany. Covered cups were often used for festivals. And here we have another. Okay, and this is these again. These are the Augsburg or Nuremberg. Some of them were made in Nuremberg. These are also very, very important Kiddush cups because of the design of them. This is about 1745, and not very big, but an important piece also for our collection. And then we get into the spice containers, which of course are used for Havdalah. The meaning is separation, and it marks the end of Shabbat and the beginning of the new week. And the blessings are recited over wine with added benedictions over spices and light. This spice container, did I get, oh, sorry, this one I want to go first. Let me just do that one first. The spices that can include allspice, cloves, cinnamon, and nutmeg signify the beautiful fragrance of the Shabbat day and the desire for a sweet week to come, and are kept in a spice container. And that we can see that here is a representation of the Eschenheimer Tower of Frankfurt. One of the favorite shapes for spice towers was that of the medieval Gothic tower, topped by turrets and pennants. In the past, it was believed that the representation of the spice tower came from the use of storing valuable spices from the Orient in the town tower. Not sure if that's true or not, but that's what we believed for a while. And here we have another lovely one, again with the turrets, 1900. It's a tower form with a clock, and that will tell you what time. Here it is right there. Let me just go enlarge that a little. Here, it's probably a bit blurred for you, but there it is. That shows a little clock, and that would show us when the collusion of the Sabbath was, so they would set it up for that. The fish, next, fish. The fish shape handmade spice container is silver and brass and holds the spices in the head right here. Although this is from Jerusalem, figural boxes were very popular in Germany and Holland, and not only for Jews. So you do often see like fishes like that which have been used for other purposes. And here we are getting into Passover. This is a silver Seder plate. The central ceremonial object of the Passover table is the Seder plate, of course, which is designed to hold the 5 or 6 symbolic foods and has these separate sections. This one's a little bit different. Some of the older ones are not the way we do it today. This Passover plate in silver is German, 19th century, and is embossed and inscribed. Words in the center of the plate in Hebrew indicate the order of the Seder. On the cartouches, one can see Moses in front of the burning bush, the crossing of the Red Sea, Abraham inviting in the 3 angels, and a family at a Seder table. Now, pewter was, I'm going to enlarge this a little so you can see the images on the end. Can you see the images? I hope so. This is from 1803, German. Pewter was used a lot for ceremonial plates and dishes, also for Purim. And this one is illustrated on the front with a scene of a Seder table and guests. You can see right here in Hebrew around the edge. And to finish Passover, we have a Haggadah here. This is very early from Livorno, Italy. It's dated 1642 and is printed on paper. The text is written in Ladino for the Sephardic community. The original woodcut images illustrate some of the plagues, and the artist was Moshe Yeshua, and the maker was Yaakov Tuviana. This is a magnificent, let me just go back again. There we go. These are, the Torah itself has always been starkly simple, made with all natural materials. And to show the importance of the Torah and to beautify it, the Torah has most often been enhanced by decorative cover and silver adornments. Here we have a magnificent example of a pair of silver rimim Torah finials from the Piedmont region of Italy, dated in 1811. The Piedmont area was one of the richest regions of Jewish heritage in Italy. It bordered on Switzerland and on France. The use of crown form of finials was a custom unique to this area, made in the Ashkenazi style, the result of the strong French influence on this northern region. They're my favorites. They're stunning. And here we have from North Africa, 19th century, silver inscribed, open, and intricate filigree work. Hebrew inscriptions read on the base, the work of craftsman Avraham. Again, something made out of textiles. Here we have a most unusual folk art Torah crown. I don't know if anybody's ever seen a cloth Torah crown before. We don't know exactly where it came from, but somewhere in Central Europe. It's heavily embroidered, and it includes the name of the donor in Hebrew. It says, Rachala, wife of Shmuel Katz of blessed memory, and it's dated 1765. So I believe that it would have been a gift to the synagogue in her memory. This Torah shield or breastplate is from Vienna, and it's dated 1906. It is silver and gilded and is a copy of an 18th century piece. It has a small rectangular opening right here, opening with changeable labels for the festivals. This is a Torah desk cover. It's from Sanida. The contemporary name of Sanida is Vittorio Veneto. It's Italian. It's from 1739. It's couched and embroidered on silk. The Hebrew inscription reads, a donation by the Honorable Joshua Emmanuel Conegliano, the Holy Congregation of Sanida in the year of 5499. The Synagogue of Sanida is installed in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Possibly this is the only piece that is missing from that synagogue. I've thought about asking them if they'll make an exchange and we'll give them that. Here we have a picture of a volunteer, Ralph Barron, and our ritual director and our adult education staff person. And that just gives you a little bit of a picture of the museum itself. And another one here with our many of our Chanukahs. And I'm going to complete this talk about this, which strangely enough, it's an object that is really not in our collection, but it does have a connection to us. In fact, when we had an exhibition showing the Roth collection, but also the story of Cecil Roth, we showed these keys also in the exhibit. And Joy Cherry recently told me that she carried them from New York for us to borrow from Mrs. Roth for that occasion. So this is the story of the keys of Florence. In London in the mid-1930s, Dr. Roth, with his keen eye, noticed in a Sotheby's auction an item titled A Collection of Keys and the Keys to the City of Florence. Cecil and his wife Irene had lived in Florence for some time and were intrigued by the listing. Irene attended the auction with a £5 note in her wallet. She asked an acquaintance to bid for her, and to her surprise, it went for a very reasonable price, as it had been listed badly in the catalogue. So she and Cecil became the new owners of these keys and its leather bag, which you can see, and the packet of paper certifying the authenticity and showing that they had been through a number of owners. In 1536, with the siege of Florence by the Spanish troops led by Charles V, the keys were stolen to prevent the doors from being barred and the city defended. Going back to an auction sale in Florence in 1893, the keys had been in the possession of an Anglo-Italian collector. Embossed on the bag were the words P.S. Gallo, Porta San Gallo, the gate that the keys opened. The keys were shown in various museums and at the London residence of the Duke of York, later King George VI. Late one night in 1944, soon after the liberation of Florence by the Allied forces, the phone at the Roths' home rang. It turned out to be a prominent member of the British cabinet. He said, "I'm calling for Mr. Winston Churchill, who understands that you own the original keys to the city of Florence." It happened that Churchill was leaving for Florence on his first official visit. The cabinet minister continued that Churchill would be most appreciative if the Roths would consent to give him the keys so that he could present them to the mayor at the welcoming ceremonies. Cecil Roth answered this way, "Please tender my sincerest respects to Mr. Churchill. But tell him I regret that I cannot accede to his request. I realize that the keys should be returned to Florence, and I have made arrangements that the keys will later go back to the city of their origin, but only when the time is right. As things stand, I do not yet feel disposed to give them back." And in time they were returned to Florence, and Mrs. Roth handed them over in a formal event. And they were restored and are now on display, I believe, at the Historic Topographic Museum of Florence. And that is my rather messy talk today.
Dorian, can I just come in? It's Aviva to say next time you give your talk, the keys actually were returned to Florence by my father, who had to execute Cecil's will, and it was in his after because it was very prized in their flat, and one of Irene's prized things. She didn't want to let it go, so she didn't
let Joy take it though. She let Joy bring them.
Oh, everybody! I don't know if you can hear me.
So after Irene died, my brother, myself, my father, we all went to Florence, and there was the most amazing ceremony where the keys were given back, and they are on display in a museum in Florence.
Is it the one, the topograph?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I got that right. I was missing a few people in the return, and I realized because he says in his thing, he says he has made arrangements. So in other words, it was in his will.
Yeah,
those were the arrangements. Yeah, thank you for telling me that.
He didn't feel disposed to give them back because obviously, what had happened to the Jews in Italy during the war.
Exactly. That was exactly why. Yeah. And but they were amazing. And I think Joy just wanted to say something. Yes. Joy, did you want to say something?
Yes, I'm not. I'm on. Anyway, I can see all of you. I don't even know how to unmute her so you can see me. But I have to tell you my personal experience with Mrs. Roth. She became a very, very good friend of mine. And I was in the fashion industry and would spend most of my lunch times with her on the Upper West Side in her very small apartment during my visits. And on one occasion, she asked me, Joy, can you carry this back to Toronto for me? And it was these keys in the black pouch. And I carried them back over the border to the Beth Tzedec Museum and presented it to, I guess Doreen was working with Fred at that time. And that's how the keys arrived in Toronto from Mrs. Roth. And I just wanted to share that with all of you. Someone described her as a Hermione Gingold, and it is such an accurate description.
And somebody else talked about her bracelets. And I happen to own 2 of the little gold bangles that she used to wear. She had like about 8 of them on her wrist. And 2 of them I purchased from her estate afterwards. They were available for purchase. But also, I visited Mrs. Roth, and I filmed her, and I have her talking about how they collected. The different ways in which they collected. And she was well over 90 when I went to see her. So she was around 90, I think, 89, 90.
An amazing woman. And I'll never forget that small apartment. I mean, her kitchen was in a closet, and we would sit in the one room. And her bedroom had a 15th century.
Yep.
Do you remember?
A wooden piece from a church, I think.
Yes, it was a crucifix over her bed. And when I questioned her about it, she said, Joy, it's not the subject, it's the quality of the carving.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. I respect that. So it was very interesting to see this range in her interests. But she was a very colorful, wonderful woman.
She was.
Give them the freedom of Jerusalem, city of Jerusalem, a big key. I remember him showing us a big key.
Sorry?
I remember your dad showing us a key that belonged to Cecil Roth, the freedom of Jerusalem.
Oh.
I don't know that.
Yeah, I have a question, if I may ask. First of all, beautifully done. And I really, really appreciate so many artificials, so many beautiful items, Kedusha. Could you go back a second to one of the ketuvas?
Yes.
And there is 2 columns there, which is very interesting. One is in Hebrew, which I both are in Hebrew, but one I recognize. I think it's called the Ketuva of Venice, Italy, 1645. There's 2 columns. I would like to, if you know what is written on the left column.
It's conditions, but I don't know what language.
What type of conditions? Because usually we don't do something that is out of the ordinary into ketuvah. But what is interesting is they divided in the same ketuvah. They divided 2 things and they put it on the same document, which gives it a very interesting halachic, I would say, enlightenment, because it's if it goes back until the 18th or the 19th century, whatever it was.
No, 1645.
1645. Yeah, that was a different one. Excuse me. I cannot see it, but never mind. But
get it for you.
Okay. So anyway, I would love to know if there's anyone that read the left side, because it says Memazala Ma'alia Edim Yitelet Hashem, and what it says over there, Ele. I don't know what is Rishona.
You see it now?
I see it, but you see the right one you can read clearly, but the left side it's
across here.
Yeah, but down there, a little bit. Aisha about it, Okay, so they're saying a good mazel, but then it's very interesting to know what is written down there. Anyway,
Israel, Beit Israel. Says here.
No, Bet Israel, but then I'm talking about the small letters, down.
Tiny letters. Ella.
There. Eile, and then whatever is written there. That's interesting.
Okay. Well, I can certainly find out more, because we have more information about every single ketubah from Shalom Sapar, who came. He's a scholar in Jerusalem, a very, very famous scholar who his expertise is in ketubot, and he identified what all of these little things were. But since I only had such a short time with each piece, I didn't go into more.
Anyway, I appreciate it so much. It's fascinating. I really appreciate your talk. Thank you so much.
If you write to me, I will send you more information about it.
Okay, perfect. Will do. Perfect.
Shalom loves this piece. It's his favorite piece. So
Wow. Wow. Interesting. Wow.
it's a wonderful piece, and it will be. And you will be able to read it, by the way, on the Israel Library's site. You'll be able to read.
They already did they do a transit?
You can the Ketov. I think it's called Ketiv. It's on already. It is already there. And if you go to their website and look up the Ketubot and then look Beth Tzedec, you will find it. And you can actually read the more detail here because it's a very high. This is not a high resolution the way the other is.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you. You were great. Don't worry. You were great. A little bit of waiting is nothing. Don't worry. It was fantastic.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Dorian, there is a message here saying, fascinating talk from one of our viewers. Fascinating talk and wonderful collection of Judaica. Well done to all those concerned. Best wishes, Pauline.
Oh, that's my cousin. That's my cousin. Pauline.
No, it's not. She's a member of our synagogue. I don't think she's a cousin, but it doesn't
matter. Not my cousin. Okay. I have a cousin, Pauline, who might be on. I don't know if she's on.
No.
Yes, it's actually me. I'm Pauline Binstock, but I can see there's a lady called Pauline who's right next to me in the small picture at the bottom. But it was actually me, Pauline Binstock, that sent the message. So well done.
We have
really, I know you had some hiccups, but it was worth waiting for. Fabulous, really.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And thank you, Aviva and Ingrid, for dealing with this. That's really good. It was really interesting. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Are there any other questions? Would you like to add anything, Aviva, David?
Just one more question. So how I knew a little bit Joseph Roth. How was his relationship in these artificials, in these beautiful items?
Well, the collection was Cecil Roth, right? And there were quite a number of people who wanted this collection, and we happened to get lucky that I think they sent Stephen Kaiser, who was to visit him in England. I think he must have still been in Oxford, and that's how I mean, we knew about it because our Rabbi Rosenberg, had been at a conference, and it had been mentioned that there was a collection, and he was looking for a collection for Beth Tzedec. And I think beautiful. I'm not sure what the future is of the museum collection. Right now, it's at Beth Tzedec and will stay for the time being. But one day, it may, travel to another setting. We'll have to see what happens, because a lot of the synagogue museums are putting their collections into the major museums, and it's a possibility for the future. Maybe, we don't know. Right now, we're just enjoying it in Toronto when we don't have COVID.
Aviva, would you like to add something to that? Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, darling.
Yeah, just to say that it was fascinating, Dorian. Thank you very much indeed. I hope when everybody can travel again and you're going Canada way, you might think about stopping off and arranging a visit to the museum. Yeah. My father actually inherited all Cecil's papers, which we're busy cataloguing at the moment. We're almost at the end of it. And if anybody's interested in having a leaf through them, I'm sure you might be, Rabbi. There is.
If anything is in Hebrew, I'm right there. But even if it's not, don't worry, I'm there. I'll help. So interesting. Listen, I used to love looking at my grandparents and with the war and everything. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. But we have to find time. Excellent.
For us all in our family, not only is it wonderful to have the legacy of Irene and Cecil, but also the legacy of Leon as well, and his philosophy. So we're very lucky. We're a very lucky family. Thank you all for listening and for remaining with us during the technical errors. Dorian, you were superb. You didn't show your nervousness. You got on with it. It was brilliant.
Oh, thank you, Aviva.
Thank you,
everybody.
Aviva.
Ingrid, back to you.
Thank you, Aviva, and to everybody for coming. I just want to remind you that tomorrow evening, Jewish Women's Aid have an evening called Lockdown Unmasked, hosted by Emma Barnett, and it's advertised on our site and in the newsletter. I'd love you to support them and join it. You heard somebody speak from JWA, and I think it's going to be quite an interesting talk.
I was putting my makeup on while they were like I could hear.
Oh, okay. And then can I ask you as well that we're going to have a Goodreads on the 16th of December. So we'd like you to reserve a 5-minute slot. Judy Line will be our facilitator that evening. So we'd like you to come forward and just let Estelle know in the office that you're willing to review your book. Thank you for your support. Wonderful evening. Thank you very, very much, Doreen, for joining us from Toronto. And another milestone for Northwood United. We've been united with from across the pond. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Aviva and David, for arranging it. Good night, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope we'll see you tomorrow at JWA. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.